afternoon and welcome to AP on Play. I am your host, Anjali Prasad. Our guest today is Miss Shadia Martini, candidate for State Representative of the 54th District, which is right here in Bloomfield Township. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Thank you so much for having me.
Shadia, we're so happy to have you today. Your district includes Bloomfield Hills, Bloomfield Township, where else?
So I have half of Bloomfield Township, all of Bloomfield Hills, almost all of Auburn Hills, all of Lake Orion, Orion Township, and I have 2 precincts from Oakland Township. So it goes all the way up north.
Okay, how many voters in your district, in our district?
Yeah, so registered voters, there's about 72,000.
Okay. And we'll talk about your campaign momentarily. Let's just let the audience get to know a little bit about you. Tell us about yourself.
So I was born and raised in Aleppo, Syria, under brutal dictatorship. So I have seen the other side of the fence, and I can tell people it's not greener on the other side of the fence. There's actually no grass on the other side of the fence. So I went to school there. I graduated from the School of Architectural Engineering. After graduating, I worked at the university as a teacher for 4 years. While teaching there, I received a scholarship from the Austrian government to do research at the University of Economics and Business in Vienna. I left Syria to Vienna. I spent a year in the urban planning department. And from there, I came here, went back to school, got my MBA from U of M with emphasis in finance and real estate. And after graduating, I started my own business. So I own 3 small businesses. I own a real estate brokerage and a construction company. And I also I'm a silent partner in a medical spa.
Okay, so let's start, I guess, with your small businesses, because I know one of your platforms is to promote small businesses. Tell me, how many employees do you have?
So I am a broker owner, so I only have like a couple of, and I work out of my house in both real estate and construction. In construction, I just added a partner. She is an architect and an interior designer, so we're now doing also some remodeling. And it's small business is not an easy undertaking, and the reality is that the economy depends on small businesses. So we really have to promote and help small business owners, and this is something that I really care deeply about. But also I care deeply about housing, and I am a housing expert. So with my background in architectural engineering, my MBA, my experience in real estate and construction, I am a housing expert, and there's no one like me in Lansing today. And we do have a huge housing crisis today that needs to be addressed. And I'm looking at the way it's being addressed, and it's being addressed from the demand side. And I believe there has to be more effort and concentration on the supply side, because this is the problem that we're having. You have more demand, less supply. All it's going to do is just make the problem worse. It's just simple. So these are things that I care about. I mean, if we want to talk about what I care about, also I care about women's right to choose. Reproductive rights are very important to me. I grew up in a country where abortion was banned, and I saw the effects of that terrible law. I also care about gun safety. I am not for not having guns. I mean, we have a constitutional right to bear arms, and that obviously we're not going to touch the Constitution. But we have weapons that belong in war zones, that we have them on our streets. Why is that? I mean, if we're not allowing people to buy tanks and jets, why are we allowing semi-automatic weapons? So there, especially what happened in Oxford, I would be representing Lake Orion.
Right.
And it's a sister city with Oxford. Many people know each other and live together, and it affected everybody in that area.
Has there been any gun legislation that was introduced since the Oxford shooting?
Yes. So with the Democrats taking control of the House, the Senate, and obviously we have the governor, so the trifecta, we were able to pass a few laws. I think we need more, though.
What were the laws that we did pass?
So we had background checks. So our current representative voted against background checks.
For anybody? Under any
Yes.
circumstances?
Universal. Well, this was specifically universal background check, so you're closing all loopholes. She voted against that. We have the safe storage. She voted for safe storage. She voted against red flag laws. So red flag laws is if, let's say, your son is having mental issues and you're scared for his life and he owns a gun, you go and tell authorities, I'm worried that my son's going to commit suicide. So it has to go in front of a judge. It's not like the police can go and take away his gun, but it has to go in front of a judge, and the judge will say whether you have to remove the guns or not. She voted against that.
Is that only for a family member, or is that for
No,
anybody
it
in the
can be
community?
for
I can
anybody.
say I'm worried about my neighbor for
Yes.
this reason. I see.
Yes,
Okay.
but it's not like, you say that and it happens. It has to go in front of a judge.
Okay. That's the red flag law.
That's the red flag law. The other law that she voted against was taking guns away from domestic abusers.
Right.
And this, I don't understand that, because the majority of women being killed happen at the hands of their partners, whether it's a boyfriend or a husband. So this is a very important law.
That law did get passed, though, didn't it?
Yes, all of them passed
Yes, all of
because
them
of the
passed. Okay.
Democrat.
Yes,
They passed
yes.
just strictly through party line.
Yes.
It was just because we have 56 seats.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. What are some of the other laws that maybe came into play the last few years that you would have voted differently on? Because we should remind our viewers that you did run 2 years ago, and I believe that you lost with a very, very narrow margin, like 1,500 votes or...
It was 1,046 votes.
Okay.
So it was 2%.
Yeah, very, very narrow
Yeah.
margin. And I really... It's very brave to run in an election. I told you that I ran in an election. I lost, and it's even braver to lose and run again. So
Thank you. I appreciate that. It is very difficult to run
Yes.
for office
Yes.
because, you get attacked unfairly most of the time.
Always.
And it's, you subject your family to all this negativity. It's a lot of hard work. And I run businesses, so it's difficult also to kind of, I'm trying to let my partner take control of the business because I'm very busy. But you also neglected the fact that I grew up under dictatorship. And, in dictatorship, they instill that fear in your head. I grew up in a country where there was no assembly, no organizing. This entire experience has been just incredible and surreal for me. Every time I sit in a meeting, let's say Femmes for Dems, it's an organization that was started by a lady by the name of Lori Goldman. And I sit there and I watch all these ladies and how involved they are in politics, in their community. And I think in my head, if this were in Syria, we would all be in prison. This is all new to me.
Yes.
And it's very exciting. And I'm so happy to be able to contribute to this country that, in effect, gave me my voice back. You
Yes.
know, growing under dictatorship, they take your voice away. And this country gave me my voice back. So it's a debt of gratitude that I have to pay back.
So tell us about, legislation that you that didn't get passed or that you would have supported. Just let's give the audience an idea of your stand on some of the issues. We talked about gun violence. We talked about reproductive rights. You were mentioning there was some legislation that was passed or maybe introduced regarding animal cruelty.
Yes, there was a few bills that were introduced against animal cruelty. And it wasn't even on party line. I mean, our current representative voted against these bills.
What kind of bills were they?
They were to increase penalties for people who abuse animals. So one of them was about pets, one of them was about companion animals, one of them was about sexual abuse to animals. So she voted against all these, and she was like one of 6 or one of 7, So you have the vast majority of Republicans even voting for these bills. Surrogacy and IVF. She voted against those. I would have definitely voted for those. I mean, IVF is so important. And in terms of surrogacy, the problem that we have here in Michigan is that we are one of, I think, the last states where if you have a child through surrogacy, the child is not yours. It's the lady who gave birth to this child.
Yes.
So they were trying to get rid of that and help parents really have their child under their name, under their insurance,
I see.
So
Okay.
she voted against that. There was a bill, for example, this is very, it's like personal to me because Samantha Stekloff, who is also a state representative, she is a beautiful soul, wonderful lady. And this lady went through breast cancer when she was in her 20s. So it was a very difficult process for her. And she has been trying to pass a law that gives oral chemo parity with chemotherapy.
I don't understand. what this...
So if you are a cancer patient, you have to go through chemotherapy, and
Yes.
chemotherapy they're going to have to give it to you through your veins. And
Yes.
So you have to get all these needle, and it keeps happening over and over. Then they put a port for you, and then it gets infected and all sorts of stuff. There is something called oral chemo. It's a pill. It's so much easier. It's not available for all sorts of cancer, but some are able to get oral chemo, but insurance companies will not allow it because there is no parity, because it's more expensive.
Right.
So she was trying to pass a law that says, you insurance companies, if this patient is able to get oral chemo, you have to pay for it. It's just a human thing to do, really. And she went out, and you should go to YouTube and hear her speech. It was so emotional. I was crying at the end of it.
What district is she a representative
She's in
of?
the 19th, I believe. It's actually the other half of Bloomfield Township.
Okay.
She has
Sure.
Franklin, Bingham Farms, Beverly Hills, part of Farmington Hills. So she was talking about her own experience. And you know how difficult that is?
Yes, it's very
To
difficult.
talk about your own experience, what you had to go through. She was talking about how she had to keep her job because she didn't have insurance outside of her job. So she was going through chemotherapy and while working. And at the end of all this emotional speech, my opponent voted against this. It's like you sit with this lady, you sit next to her, you see her every day,
Yeah.
you see her, what she went through.
Did this bill pass?
I believe so, yes,
Okay.
it did. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's, we have to be more empathetic to people. I don't believe on voting down party lines. I believe that we have to look at everything, study it from all points of view. Because
You were talking about let's talk about housing, because
Yeah.
you said that's your background. So what is the housing crisis that we're experiencing here in Michigan?
So it's multi-tiered, and it's a very difficult problem. So to say that I'm going to just go to Lansing and solve the problem, I would be lying.
Of course,
It's
nobody can do that.
It's not an easy problem
Yeah.
to solve because there's so many levels to this problem. So the way I see this is in 2001, after the horrific day that we all experienced on 9/11, Michigan pretty much almost immediately went into recession before any other part of the country. With that happening in Michigan, we lost a lot of contractors. Many left the state, went to other states because they couldn't find work, and many builders actually went bankrupt. So we lost all these trades and we lost builders and all that. So there was no construction. There was very little construction for a long time. And we're feeling the results and seeing the results today. So this is one problem. Second problem, we have zoning laws. Suburban Detroit is a huge, huge area. Each 2 blocks, you have a city. You have a township.
Right.
Right next to each other. I mean, you can't tell that you left one to the other. Yet every one of them has its own zoning laws and its own master plan. There has to be, this has to stay. I mean, you have to have local control. But you also have to have an overall bird's view of the entire area. This is something that I noticed the first day I came to Michigan. Driving from the airport back, I'm like, this makes no sense. As a person who studied urban planning, who, spent a year researching urban planning, I immediately saw that there was no master plan for the entire area. So that is something that also has to be looked into.
That's a good point.
Another problem that we suffer from is the actual price of land. So if you're buying a lot for 100,000, 200,000, 500,000, what are you going to build on it? So affordable housing, in effect, does not exist. And this is when the government has to interfere.
So give us an idea of of what kind of legislation you could introduce to alleviate this crisis in Michigan.
So one of the things that can be helped by government, like look at the mortgage, for example. The entire
Yes.
mortgage idea it was the government interfering and guaranteeing loans.
Right.
And this is how we came to the American dream, to having, homes and owning our own homes. If you are a builder today and you go and try to get financing to build a house, it's almost impossible. This is where we can come in and guarantee loans for builders. Obviously, it's not going to be to anybody, and it has to be same thing with mortgages. You have to check your credit and all that.
Right.
But at least having something available. There's nothing. You can't, as a builder, build a spec home. The big builders, they actually take lines of credit. So that shouldn't be. Even developing is just such a difficult process, such a costly process. It's not financeable, and it takes such a long time. So there's so many problems, so many tiers of problems that have to be addressed.
What about, let's talk back again about small businesses. How can we encourage small businesses here in Michigan, or alleviate the burden of running a small business? What ideas do you have? And I'm asking as a small business owner.
Yeah, I mean, first problem with small businesses is really financing. So you start, I jump from one thing to another, and it's, the problem with financing is, you go and start a small business. Let's take a restaurant, for example, because those are the largest number of small businesses in the state. They start with this idea and this dream, and they take the space, either lease or buy, and then they decorate it, and then they start working. But they don't have enough money to really survive the next 6 months.
Right.
And it takes a long time for a business to be known.
Yes.
So help with marketing, help with advancing lines of credit for businesses. There's so much that can be done to help small businesses, whether taxes. I mean, we can just give them tax breaks for the next year or two until they're actually a viable business.
Yes, it takes at least a year to become viable.
At least.
Yes.
And by the time you get to that year, they have no money left.
Yes.
And the business folds. And this is why restaurants fail. Like, I think in the first year, it's like 5 out of 7 restaurants fail.
Ooh.
It's crazy.
Yeah, it's high.
And this is not failing. This is not a business failing. This is a dream failing. Because if you are a person who's starting a business, you have that dream, and this dream is gone. So, we have to step in and help, because we can do a lot to help small businesses in our state.
Well, we talked about small businesses, guns, reproductive rights, animal cruelty. What other issues do you hold close to your heart? You're obviously a very passionate politician, I'll say that. So you must have some issues that are some more issues
Yes.
that are very meaningful to you.
2 come to mind. Education. I believe that we have no economy without education. We have no future without education. So strengthening our public education is very important, because public education at the end of the day is the great equalizer. And the reality is today it is not. So we have areas like our area with fabulous schools, and then you go to Detroit, which is like just a few miles south.
Yes, or Pontiac.
Yeah,
a few miles north.
I worked with a lady who worked for Teach America.
Yes, I remember it.
Yes, she was a young graduate, very passionate, and I was helping them buy a house. Her husband was a doctor, and she broke down crying in the car. I was asking her about her work, and she's like, I don't take a penny back home. I spend it on my kids.
Yeah.
I have kids who come to school. They need a hug. They need a touch. I mean, we're going down to the basics of what a child needs. So there is so much to do in public education, but we also have to have some equity in public education. And at the end of the day, as a society, some people think of this, oh, well, I don't have kids going to school. Why am I spending the money on schools?
A lot of people think that.
Because we live in a society, and you're either paying to educate people or you're paying to build more prisons.
Yes.
We have to be more strategic about this, even from a personal benefit point of view. It makes sense. So education is very important to me. What's also very important to me is the environment. I mean, how are we the Great Lakes state and we have cities that have no drinking water?
How does that happen?
How does that happen? And talking about drinking water, there was a bill to have filtration systems in schools so that there's no lead in the water.
Right.
My opponent voted against it. I mean, we need at least our kids to drink
clean water
without lead. And again, let's talk about this from a pure self-interest.
Yes.
We're not providing this for our kids, not from a human point of view, from self-interest. What are we doing as a society? We're creating kids that have learning disabilities.
Yes.
And aren't we going to be spending money on that?
Yes.
So what is the point? Aren't we shooting ourselves in the foot?
Well, it's like you said, either spend your money on education or spend it on jails, because without education, our kids are going to end up doing things that they shouldn't be doing.
Precisely.
And that turns into bad behavior as adults, and that turns into crime, and then they're in the criminal justice system. So I agree with you, and I've spent my entire career in the criminal justice system as a prosecutor and a defense attorney, and I agree with you. There's only one way to fight the war on violence, the war on drugs, the war on domestic assault, and that is through education.
Yes, because if you're a child that does not have anything at home, and there are many of these kids out there. You have a mother who's an alcoholic, you have a mother who can't find a job, whatever it is. I mean, we have so many issues, and it can happen to anyone, right? At least you'll have something at school. You have someone who's taking care of you. You have someone who is interested in your future. But to let our kids down like this, it's not right. It's not right from any point of view, whether you're talking about from a human level, from self-interest, from a societal level, it's all wrong.
If you had to advocate for one piece of legislation in the state of Michigan in the next year that had to do with the public schools, what would it be? What is one rule or law or factor that should be changed in public education?
It's not really a factor, but it's the idea that I want to, and there are organizations that are now doing this, I want them to study how other school systems are working, whether in the United States or in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
What points are we missing? Because we don't want to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
There are systems that are very successful. Let's study those systems and let's do the same things.
Yes.
This is a recipe for success.
Well, Shadia, it has been very nice having you this morning. Again, I really admire anybody who could put themselves up for office, to run for office one time, let alone two times. So I'm happy you made time for us, and I want my audience to vote, however you decide to vote next month. Just vote some way. And thank you for tuning in to AP on Play. We'll see you next time. I'm Anjali Prasad, your host.